Wow, that's an intro. How's the energy? Good? All right? Okay. Better than it was. You've only got, it's me between now and a break. So relax, enjoy this session knowing you have a long break after me. I'm sure your heads are already bulging with thoughts, provocations, ideas that are coming out of that fantastic presentation from James. And we want you to be able to sort of digest that and react to it. As a contrast, so lots and lots of stats and great bits of data and information for you to take away. My presentation is not really about that. We're kind of contrasting it a bit. What I'm going to do for my session is just provoke you a bit. Just fill your heads with more stimulus, but different types of stimulus, if you like, from the world of branding. So having a brand strategy is key. That was what I was set off today thinking that I would talk about. But then when I looked at all of the brands that are represented in this room, it's not my place to tell you why a brand is key and how to develop a brand. So I thought I would change it a little bit and focus on why having a brand in a digital world is key, and how your brand lives and breathes in the digital world, and how you make that connection with audience. This is our manifesto. As Petri said at the start, this isn't the truths or the gospel, as it were. This is just stimulus. This is how we think things are playing out. We're learning every day, but we want to learn together with you, and we're seeing some great examples of brands really taking advantage of the web, and that's what we want to share with you today. Because brands, I love brands. I love them. For consumers, they offer trust, information, credibility, comfort, and hopefully in most cases pride. And then for businesses like yourselves, they offer that ability to create a disproportionate success in sales, profits, loyalty, margin, etc., that you get beyond just the rational metrics of the performance world. To look forward, then, we need to take a step back, if you like, a bit. Brands have been making the most of sight, sound, and vision for years and years. 1941, the first TV ad, and if you think radio, 20 years before that, and press, God knows, well into the previous century. But it was only really the 80s that we started to move away from quite functional, rational, informational advertising and into this world of really engaging with consumers on an emotional level. This is the first TV ad I remember. I remember it because it played on a Friday night in 1985, the day before I went to Live Aid with my dad at Wembley Stadium. So I was quite a cultured child. No, I wasn't. But let's play this. When that ad came out, there was a bomb went off, a cultural bomb. Everybody went out and bought jeans. It had just created a reaction within consumers that had never been known before on an emotional level. It was this emotional response that people had just never seen in advertising before. And this emotional response was through storytelling. What they were able to do was connect and tell their story in a far more vivid way than they'd ever been able to do with pure functional advertising. To get across all of the benefits of Levi's, the Americanness, the sex, the individualness, the youth, the rebellion, everything that Levi's wanted to stand for came across within their storytelling by creating that emotional response. But it wasn't just the emotional response in isolation, because emotional response is important, but love and trust over time is what gives you your brand. And it wasn't just the laundrette ad. I'm sure we could probably reel off now the follow-ups from that, whether it was the guy down by the lake, or Flat Eric, or what was it, the spaceman one as well. So they actually did this every 6 months or so with a fresh piece of creative that was consistent in its storytelling, its brand principles, and continuing to tell that brand story, but keeping it fresh to constantly create an emotional response from consumers, and doing it over time. And the reason why this was successful was because they were able to rely on mass media, the mass world, if you like. And, mass audience and mass media were brilliant. I remember if I wanted to catch up on and be on top of everything in the music world in the 80s and 90s, it was Top of the Pops. 7:30 on a Thursday, and I remember it well. And this shows how much of an important landmark it was for me as somebody growing up every week. I remember when they moved it to 7 o'clock to accommodate EastEnders, and I remember when they moved it to Thursday to try and counteract to Emmerdale, and then they moved it back to Thursday because it wasn't working, etc. So it's these things, these single appointments of views were brilliant, and that mass media helped to create mass brand storytelling as well. And, media agencies in the 80s that were splitting away from the creatives, what they were doing was a brilliant job of creating efficiencies, if you like, in that mass media through GRPs, reach and frequency. How do we slice and dice that mass media in a way that works for us? But that's not the case anymore. Not only has the reach of mass media declined, but also its nature has changed as well. No longer, before mass media, it was TV and newspapers that were setting the cultural agenda and reporting it first. That's not the case anymore. Now, TV is kind of reporting the cultural agenda that's been set by other mediums. We're seeing the fast decline, even over a short space of time, of the success, if you like, of winners of some of the reality pop idols, etc., around the world. Because they're not setting the agenda anymore. People don't need to wait for an annual TV series to come. It's still great viewing, but it doesn't set the agenda. And newspapers are getting to the news after the event, which is becoming, there's a friend of mine owns a company called We the Media, and I think it just sums up brilliantly the fact that we are, if you've got a phone and you've got a camera, you're a journalist. So with this, this mass media world is declining. What do we do? What is it that we are going to do in that world? Because for consumers, what that offers is choice. Any place, any time, anywhere. I used to work at Sky, and at the end of the last decade, when we were releasing shows and series that were not only being played out on once-a-week appointments of view, but were being played out on demand, on catch-up, on delayed viewing through Sky Plus. The production teams were high-fiving. They were popping out the champagne because audiences were growing across when you totaled up all of those platforms. But the ad people were sitting there with their heads in their hands because the traditional linear way of selling advertising on TV was in massive decline. So there was this massive difference, if you like. And if that's what the TV salespeople were doing, then what does that mean to you as brands? That's got to be an equal challenge to you. How do you tell your brand story and grow a brand in a world where you don't have to worry about 1 or 10 channels anymore? It's 100,000 channels that are out there that your consumers are engaging with for you to reach them. And I suppose what we've been doing is this. And this makes sense, right? Creating incremental reach, using digital platforms to bridge the gap that's being left by the decline in mass media reach and frequency. And this works. I'm not knocking it. It works. But let's acknowledge it is, by its very nature, incremental. And I think this is really unfair on digital platforms that are out there to use what is such fantastic new stuff that's being created every day to try and fill the gap of a traditional old tool. It's like giving someone a gun and then banging someone over the head with it. We need to realise the strength of the digital platforms in their own right, and then use them to the most effect to help us to grow our brands. And I suppose when we think about it, it still comes back to traditional marketing principles, traditional brand building principles. I don't think that changes at all. We are still all human beings, and it's about winning our hearts if you are a brand, and that remains the key objective. And if that remains the key objective, then I would argue that the 3 pillars or 3 pillars that make that up remain the same as well. And these are probably objectives, goals that you've set yourself for many years, and they definitely still are valid and key. Find the right people, tell great stories, and then build stronger relationships. But the digital world gives us an opportunity to just rethink how we go about these 3 pillars. So I'm just going to go through those in order and just give you some stimulus, a bit of provocation about how we're seeing some brands and advertisers really making the most of the digital world to do this. So the first is about finding the right people. Love this quote. Today's tool set is a much sharper set of knives, and Wendy Clark at Coca-Cola knows a few things about branding. And what she means by that is she's saying that actually reach and frequency and targeting by audience demographics is a valid tool, and it absolutely is. But we are naive if we think that that is the only tool still available to us. And we need to think about how the digital world is creating new tools, fresh tools for us to reach our audience and to find that audience as well. And those three new tools that are not only new tools to the block, but also sharper as well, I would argue. That is data, context, and choice. Now, data, I'm not going to begin to try and tell you guys about data. Data is the lifeblood of many of your organisations and businesses. But I do find it interesting when I talk to organisations, and particularly retailers, that rely so heavily on data in one part of their business to then totally ignore the power and the value of it when it comes to building their brand and telling their brand story. I just think the best thing, the best way I can bring this to life is that every brand that I have ever worked with has audience segmentation, an audience picture. They have caricatures of their audience, and much time and investment and resource has gone into building that picture of their audience. And then you look and see what they're buying against. What's their buying audience? And it doesn't resemble that at all. So all I think the way to think about it is data, is that absolutely, when it comes to building reach and reach quickly over time, you absolutely have to sacrifice to some degree your core audience and who they are. But I would argue that in today's world, neglecting them and sacrificing them to the degree we do by pure demographic targeting and reach and frequency of them is taking it a step too far. I think we can go further up the ladder and get closer back to who our audience were again in the first place. Context. Love context. Context has been around for a long, long time, and magazines have done this brilliantly for many, many years. But 2 things with magazines. 1, frequency. They don't come out often enough, most of them. And also the reach hasn't always been brilliant, and it's obviously being challenged more at the moment. If you go online, though, and you look at, if you combine things like sites, videos, communities, apps, you can very quickly build a high level of audience within a contextualized environment. So I take the example as travel here. So if you look at Rio, and if you wanted to associate your brand with Rio or destination in South America, you can very, very easily and quickly build a contextualized audience in the millions in a single country population like the UK or Germany or of nations of similar size. So the web offers us the ability to give that context that's become harder and harder for us to achieve when it comes to print media. But the best of all, I think the best opportunity and the best knife that's been added to our block with the digital media is choice. And choice is just fantastic. I think that we've already spoken about it. James talked about TrueView, etc. And I think that the worst thing that we did when we launched TrueView was to use the word skippable. So we said it was skippable media. And I think that paints such an inferior position. You know, it's an inferior complex for not only your brand, but also our product as well. The way that we like to frame it is inviting people to connect. And that's how we should have invited it from the first day, because that's essentially what it is. If I gave you the ability to go on every high street and ask people if they wanted to have a conversation about your brand, and you would only pay me for those that said, yes, please, I would love to engage with you on that, then you'd probably bite my hand off. And that's exactly what I think of when it comes to the choice, the products that offer you choice on the web. And we've got two ways in which I'll show you that. TrueView in a moment, but the first one is a great example of engagement ads all across the web. And watch this one as it starts.
It's a totally new and upgraded user experience that you get from this interface. It's got such an incredibly slim and finely crafted look. You can see how thin it is there.
So I think that's great. So if you imagine the information that you currently get or that you squeeze into a page ad in press, etc. So the ability to have just a very small standard ad size there. But if someone chooses to engage with it, and it's a 2-second rollover, by the way, then it expands to, it could be video content. It could be a much bigger screen with lots of dynamic content going on in there as well. James mentioned earlier, that was one of the examples of Samsung, who did live, so they ran those ads during the live launches of their products. And obviously they ran them after as well to capture that audience. But a fantastic success rate in terms of people choosing to engage. And we spoke earlier about Gumtree and the surprise of the engagement that people have, or the amount of people that choose to watch those ads. I won't give you the exact figures, but our forecast for the view through that we thought we would get on TrueView was far, far lower than it actually was. So even when I talk about us learning, we're learning every day that if you make great content, then people do want to engage with it. Absolutely. And if your brand is telling a great story, then people want to listen to that. So it doesn't need to be an inferior proposition. It's a positive one that says, here we are, would you like to have a conversation with us now, or would you like to connect with us later? And by the way, the vast majority of people that don't choose to connect with on TrueView is because they've seen it before. So actually, it's because they've already seen it, they're reminded of it. Thanks very much, but I've seen that. I don't need to see it again. But there's figures to show the uplift in your brand recall as a result of simply being shown that reminder, even if you choose not to watch. And we talk about TrueView. So I'm going to show you an example from Turkish Airlines that some of you may have seen. But if you've got the ability to offer choice to consumers, and you've also got the ability to entice as well. Now, Turkish Airlines, I think, before this ad campaign, very few of us would have chose to engage with Turkish Airlines unless we were at that point of purchase where we were looking to fly to Turkey or one of their destinations tomorrow. But from a brand point of view, we probably would have chose to skip or not decline the invitation to connect at that point. So what they did was, because they knew consumers had a choice, they thought, how do we ensure that we entice them into engaging with our brand message? So Kobe Bryant and Lionel Messi, they'll do for a start. And you'll see that they're very prominent very quickly. So they've really made the most of that 5-second invitation window, if you like. Let's play this ad if we can.
Messi?
Hey, kid.
Kobe Bryant?
Would you like to have some ice cream, young man?
Ice cream?
Two.
The best fly with Europe's best airline. Turkish Airlines.
Love that ad. So right at the start of it, the child says Messi, and then he says Kobe. And that's the 5-second cutoff. So they've really maximised that opportunity, if you like, to engage with them. So with choice becomes the ability to entice and create a disproportionate engagement. If they'd said, we're Turkish Airlines, do you want to have a conversation? Most people would have said no. But they use the power of associated heritage and brands to itself. I'm sure some of you are sitting there going, great, well, that's what Messi and Kobe Bryant will do for you. But, and of course, there's an investment there. But if you think Adidas use Messi all the time in their content and have videos of him on their website, and this piece of content far outstrips the viewership of their content, I think, because they put an invitation out there to connect. 100 million, I think the latest number, if you go on YouTube, is over 100 million views of that piece of content. And by the way, they've not paid for a fraction of those. They've built a strategy, and I suppose that's the opportunity with choice as well. If you make content, then you also give the ability for people to share it or to look for it, and you don't have to pay for that invitation at all because other people give that invitation on your behalf. So, find the right people. That hasn't changed. That's still the same. But I would urge you to ask yourself a new question. It's not about how many GRPs do I need, or what's the reach percentage that I need of a target audience or an audience demographic, and how many times do they need to see or view my ad before they engage, or before my brand heritage or metrics increase. Actually, the question is quite simple, and it's probably one that's more akin to your business than it is your marketing. You know, how many people do I need to build my business, and how will I reach them? Let's take Pampers, okay? So something out of your world, P&G Pampers, and ignore these numbers. I'll make these numbers up for demonstration purposes. Let's imagine that every year Pampers will naturally lose a number of audience because kids grow up. Unfortunately, they do, unless you work in X at Google. But children grow up, and so they're losing audience. So let's say they lose 1 million people every year, naturally, because those kids grow out of nappies. So the starting point for Pampers isn't, I need to reach 80% of housewives 4 times during a 5-week flighting campaign. Their business is, for my business to grow, I need to reach 1,000,001. Oh, and by the way, if I want to double my market share, it might be 2 million. Or whatever that number be. But I would urge you to actually, if you don't have those numbers on paper or in your heads, then I would urge you to go and find those, because they're available. They're probably numbers that you live and breathe by more than you do your media metrics. And that's your starting point. And then ask yourself, how do I find that audience? And I would say that GRPs and reach is going quite far away from finding that audience. I don't think you have to stretch quite so far anymore. I'm happy to be challenged on that, but that's what we're learning, and we're seeing people do great success by combining that reach and frequency. We know there's tons of data around that. You've got years and years of numbers and information that helps to support that. But let's invest some time and effort understanding what's going on a bit closer to our actual audience, not our media demographics. So if that's find the right people, how are we doing? Oh, flying on time. Look at this. Get out for a break earlier. So you found the right audience, and you've found them. Then it's all about telling great stories. Another quote from AKQA. Love these guys. Really forward thinking. Yes, they work with some cool brands as well, but they do a lot of great work across their full portfolio of clients. And the challenge is to be innovative with the technology that we have to tell a great brand story. And I think that again is the, bless you, is the push, is that I think using with today's tools or traditional media tools, we're restricting ourselves. We're restricting ourselves to a 30-second TV spot or a page in a newspaper. And the amount of people that I speak to that have just become conditioned to that. They set out to make a 30-second TV ad, not to tell a great brand story. And I think that, again, we can challenge ourselves or use what's available to us in a digital world to provoke us around what is our brand story first, and then how do we best tell that. And I think here's a great example of a brand that does that, has done that brilliantly. So Clinique and all of the luxury makeup and cosmetic brands, they invest a huge amount of money in face-to-face consulting in store, in retail. I'm sure I'm speaking to people that know this far better than I do. But they spend a huge amount of money, and what's been good is that they haven't been tempted to change that. They know that their brand story is about personalised consultation, so they haven't tried to change that too much. But what they've been crying out for is a new platform that helps them to continue along that brand story. And using Hangouts on Google Plus is a great way. So a live beauty consultant on a Hangout regularly talking to audiences about different areas around skincare and beauty tips and advice. So a really nice example there of going, what is the best expression of my brand promise? Sticking to it, but looking around the web to find, is there new ways in which I can have that conversation? I'll show you this in a minute, because there's also, what's brilliant about the web is just the fact that you don't have the restriction of time. You can tell your story however best it needs to be told and take however much time it takes. When I work with, I don't know if there's any people representing the creative agencies here today, but when I talk to you guys, every time, the first meeting, someone will show me their video, their brand video, and it's either made to win the pitch, or it's made when there's a big strategic direction change in the brand. But you spend all of this money making a new video that best tells your brand story, and it never sees the light of day in the public because it's often 5 or 6 minutes long or something like that. I've seen lots of brands do this, and you just think, wow, why don't you just put that out there to people? Mixed with some of those principles we shared around how you find your audience, you can engage with people and invite them to connect with your full brand story, not just the 30-second TV ad. So I'll play this in a moment, but let's watch Dove's. So this was Dove's Real Beauty campaign. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It's a fantastic piece of digital work. But we'll show the TV ad first, shall we?
Dove asked women, what do you love about your body?
God, that's a tough question.
And then we asked, what do you love about your friend's body?
Your nose is better than my one.
Oh, we've both got big nose. Our whole family have big nose.
Sorry to be crude, but I'd really like your butt.
And all her skin is just amazing.
Thank you. She's got bigger boobs than me, so... I'd rather. I'll be happy if I look like my mum when I get to my mum's age.
So that's a good ad. A good ad. That's a minute long. Now, if you ask yourself, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that there wasn't as much of the campaign that was run as 60s as there were as the cut-down version of 30s. And by the way, there was also a cut-down version of a 10 as well. So as a 60, it's a pretty good ad, but that's not what most of us saw. And then let's play this, which is the 3-minute version that lived on the web.
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we are. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's...
She looks closed off and fatter. Sadder, too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy.
I should be more grateful of my natural beauty.
It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Hands up if that was the first time you'd seen that piece of content. Impactful? Yeah. I mean, it's you know, it's quite American, but that's a good thing, by the way, for all Americans in the room. But I'm sure we would all agree. You know, I watched that many, many times, and it's still far more impactful than that minute long, which was a good ad, by the way. Again, just to reiterate that, it was a good ad. But that, I think, is what Dove is really all about, and their ability to do that. They could never do that on TV. So, so staying true, you know, using, not being constrained by time, and starting out with what does my 30-second TV ad look like, starting with what does my brand story look like. But it's not just time. Schedule. So this is a nice example from Australia, actually, but it's a really nice example. So I love it all the time when there are flighting of campaigns. Now, I know that in lots of your worlds, there is seasonality, right? So that makes absolute sense. But that aside, the reason, I mean, I've heard lots of different reasons why we do flighting. A lot of it is around just budgets and constraints that have existed, again, in a traditional world. But if you're running a campaign for 6 weeks, and then I come into your market in the 7th week, then you've missed me. You've absolutely missed me. And this is a great example of a campaign that ran in Australia for Metro trains. So it was for the train network, and it was all about promoting safety around the railways. And so this campaign ran online. So absolutely, as you would expect, there was a steep uplift in views when the campaign launched. But by offering the combination of choice, etc. as well, they were able to, over the next period of time, so the next 6 months, they doubled the reach of that campaign, or the viewership of that piece of creative, by it just being there, it living and breathing. They didn't do a lot. Obviously, they did most to promote it here, but then actually having it there, having it permanently there, and then referring to it, allowing people to search and share it. The amount of times that I've still today see a great TV ad, or remember an old TV ad that I want to play and show people, and I just can't find it anywhere, or I find it on YouTube, but it's been posted by somebody else, not your brand. Somebody else has put it up there, and it's often an inferior quality piece of copy. So appreciate that you don't have to be bound by time lengths or campaign schedule time. Ensure that your copy, your story exists and lives and breathes for however long it needs to on the web, for people to go and see it when they're ready, when they need to. And with that, I think it's a nice progression on that line about structuring your conversation. So I went to BMW's website because I'm in the market for buying a car. And they so then they retarget me on YouTube and play me a 50-second video about their engine. Now, and again, what I like about this is that it would have been easy for them to have shown me an ad about offers or trying to bring me down the purchase funnel quickly. But what they recognised was I hadn't gone into car configuration on their website. I hadn't gone into that level of depth. I was just simply browsing. So they resisted the temptation to try and sell me today. And what they did was they made a call that actually maybe I need a little bit more love and connection with their brand story. So then they show me the 50-second version of a video that's all about their engine. What they also do is invite me to go and watch a 5-minute piece of content about the car. If you like the engine, you might like the car. So they're absolutely structuring a conversation in the same way that you would dynamic remarketing in the performance world. But what they're doing is they are being very clear about ensuring that they're telling me their brand story in an orchestrated way that helps me to best fall in love and win my heart with that emotional response that they're looking for at the very beginning. This Oh, the picture's lost there. That's Joan Collins. So there's an ad campaign that's running certainly in the UK and I think a couple of other markets as well from Snickers. And their whole brand story is "You're not yourself when you're hungry." And the content and the TV execution is a guy after soccer with his mates in the change room, and it's actually Joan Collins being a real diva because the guy's just really hungry, has a bite of Snickers, turns back into himself, and it's a good piece of content. And they ran that on TrueView, by the way, and it would have been really easy for them to have just gone, let's take that creative direction and put that all over the web in the various formats. But actually, what I really applaud them for is because Joan Collins and diva wasn't their brand story. Their brand story is "You're not yourself when you're hungry," and they stayed true to that. Then they asked themselves, how do we best translate that brand story using all the different parts of the web? And this is just a lovely example in search. And I always applaud people that manage to use search in creative ways. So what happens is when you spell incorrectly, so you've spelt business wrong there, and then they've top of the search thing saying, "Did you mean this? You're not yourself when you're hungry." A really nice brand message, totally in line with their brand story, and I think that's a really, really nice example. So when it comes to telling great stories, and by the way, that's an art, and that's an art we still admire today in the creatives that work in our industry. But I don't think it's about trying to fit your brand story into the hole that exists in a 30-second TV ad or a page in a newspaper. I'd flip it on its head, and my challenge to you is, what's your brand story? Tell that the best it can be, and then find the hole and the shape and the depth of that hole that needs to exist for you to do that brand story. Again, trusting that if you combine it with some of those principles around how you find your audience, you will always be able to stay true to that brand. And then finally, building stronger relationships. So we're finding the right people, we're creating an emotional response in them, but how are we doing that, winning that love and trust over time with great relationships? So this is Seventh Generation, is quite a small household products company in the US that some of you may have heard of, but they're just really innovative in the way that they think about how they market and communicate and talk to housewives and main shoppers across the US and their other markets. And I think that's important. We have to reevaluate what relationship means, or how, sorry, let me reframe that. We have to reevaluate how we nurture our relationships. But I think relationships still means the same thing. Because it's all about shared values and passions. C.S. Lewis, famous quote, said, "A friendship is formed when one person says to another, 'What, you two? I thought I was the only one.'" And I love that quote, and I think it's quite extreme. But the point is that all of our friendships and personal relationships that exist, most of them are based on shared values and passions. And so it's exactly the same when it comes to brand marketing. And again, all digital world is doing for us is giving us the opportunity to enhance that conversation, that relationship. Cadbury here, really nice example. So Cadbury recognise that a large part of their community and their audience are into baking. So what they choose to do is to facilitate a conversation. They've said, "What, you two?" They didn't say, "We thought we were the only ones," but they did say, "What, you two? Us as well." And what I like about this is that they're not trying to push their content on them, because there's tons and tons of people out there, both in a sort of other competitor brands, but also individuals who are really credible in the baking space. So actually what they've done is to resist the temptation to just push their content at people through their community page. Actually what they're doing is facilitating a forum to allow everybody to have a conversation together. And of course, they are winning a relationship through that by being those facilitators of a conversation. I used to work in sponsorship in radio a long time ago, and again, love sponsorship. And I think I'm sure we are not making the most of the sponsorship opportunities that exist on the web. And again, the principles behind it are exactly the same. And I know, looking at the brands that are represented here today, that you all do or have done considerable sponsorship ventures in the past. And I think the web offers us exactly the same opportunity. So here, Ocado, they choose to be introduced to their consumers by Jamie Oliver's Food Network, and Sir Jamie Oliver's saying, here's my friend Ocado, they share the same values as us, let's welcome them into their community. And there's tons, I'm not going to go into the detail of this because I'm sure it makes absolute sense to you, but recognise those opportunities to borrow some of that relationship that other people already have on the web, especially if you're trying to push your brand into new areas. The amount of times in a Brand Lab workshop we come up with really good content directions for a brand or a change and a shift of strategy. And especially when that's taking you into somewhere where you're not yet credible, then there's nothing wrong with borrowing some of the credibility that somebody else already has. But most of all, I think relationships are accelerated through recognition. And again, comes back to this point around remarketing. And it's just hugely underutilized when it comes to telling your brand story and building relationships. Anyone here seen that that terrible film, 50 First Dates? There we go. A few guys just going, yeah, I was forced to see it, Kirk. I was forced to see that. But the principle is, or Groundhog Day, I guess, if you like. The principle is every day they wake up and the day starts again. They have their first date over again. The conversation is exactly the same as it was the previous day. And this is what's happening with our brand, with our relationships in marketing if we're using, I think, traditional media, because we're doing it based on a probability that somebody will have watched our first creative so we can show them the second creative and tell them a different message and progress that relationship over time. 50 First Dates doesn't need to happen with remarketing because we know where we're at with our conversation and then we just develop it even further. And this makes it really, really affordable. A quick experiment. So let's say my demographic here today, this is my only numbers slide, by the way. So the demographic that I want to target is this audience. So gorgeous, successful, intelligent people. You can buy that on Barb, apparently, or 1854s, let's call it that. That's my buying audience. Let's say if I buy daytime TV, UK example, don't focus too much on the numbers, it's £15. But actually, depending on what I'm selling, it may well be because I'm buying a buying audience that's quite far removed from my actual audience that I want to find and talk to. It might well be that I'm only engaging with 10% of you, or 10% of you are only interested in my brand, my conversation, or what I've got to offer or sell. So my effective CPM, £150. If I then want to develop that conversation even further, so let's say of the 10% of you that engaged with my first communication, I want to engage with the 5% of you that did something about it, or I believe that it touched or had an impact, then my remarketing cost per thousand in that world on TV all of a sudden doubles again to £300 cost per thousand. So using remarketing and we saw the Gumtree example then of some of their eCPMs and their view rates, it remains consistent. It remains consistent over time. So £60 is based on an average auction price per view on YouTube of about 6 pence. So £60 cost per thousand there to reach you. But actually, I don't want to reach you because that's not what I'm interested in anyway. I'm interested in the 10% of you that might be engaged with my product. And that cost me exactly the same. And then, by the way, I want to reconnect with the 5%, the half of those people that actually did something that engaged with me, and it remains exactly the same. So if you want to look at it as a price comparison and look at efficiencies there, then I think the story is compelling. I know I'm only putting the side here for digital, not TV, but please allow me that. You're at Google. But the last but not least around this is the ability to move people through the funnel faster. So I get carried away with branding, and I love brand stories, and then I have to remember that you're trying to sell stuff at the end of the day. But what it does have the ability to do, and I think again Gumtree was a really nice example of that, was you can do a branding campaign, but you can also ensure that when they want to, you can bring them into a performance client and bring them right down that funnel as quickly as you like. So James and I fought it out for the right to show the Juicy Couture ads, and you'll see why in a moment. But let me play that, and then we'll actually I'm going to talk over this one, but we'll play it. The pictures are the most important bit. he says. So, there we go. Sorry, excuse me. So a great branding ad. Bang on brand story with its glamour, etc. Everything that's about the West Coast America, but at every stage as well, giving you an ability to actually click through to buy and purchase. So if you are engaged with the brand so much that you actually like that product, you can click through at any point and buy it. So I'm watching this. I love the brand. Nice bracelet. That's not for me. The snow leopard dress could be. I tell you what, I love though. This one, the peekaboo dress is mine, so I click through to buy that. Unfortunately, they don't have it in my size right now. But the point being here that, again, we're not saying that you have to keep your branding separate to your performance. I think in some respects, performance has dominated our brand story to too much in some cases. Not always, but too much. But absolutely, you can have both living and breathing together. And if at any point somebody says, yeah, do you know something? You don't need to keep talking to me about your brand. I want it. I'd love to buy whatever you're selling or offering today. Then again, digital gives you that ability to, you don't have to wait or rely on them to do something about it later. They can click through straight away. So when it comes to building relationships, it's just simply how can the technology, how do we use the technology that's available to us to build stronger relationships, and I think faster as well, not relying on next week's episode where we bought a spot in where we know that consumer's probably going to be watching the series, so they'll come back again next week. We can build it because we know who they are, particularly through recognition. And that's it from those pillars. Now, I may have been at times quite aggressive with my passion here, and it is just that. It's just a passion for this. Like I say, this is an art. Branding is, well, the reason why I love branding is that it is an art. We're trying to bring science to it for the benefit of us all, but it still remains an art, and so there isn't a right answer. But we think that these are the questions that will start to get us to new and different places and move our brands forward faster. So how many people do I need to build my business, and how am I going to get them? I'd say that is a more effective question than how many people do I need to reach, how often. What is my brand story, and how do I tell that in the most compelling way? Not what does my next 30-second TV ad need to look like. And then how can technology allow me to build my brand relationship faster? That is building better brands. Like I say, we don't have the answers, but we love to work on the answer. Every answer is individual in the branding space. And as Petri said in his introduction, Brand Lab, which you had a flyer on as well in your gift bag, is just a service that we offer to actually roll our sleeves up together. We don't have the answers, but we have some great frameworks and principles that we work through together, taking your challenge and seeing what does that look like, or what could it look like? Safe in the knowledge that we're in an incubator, it doesn't have to happen. So our challenge to you is to reach out and use us to help to look at what the whole web can look like, and not just Google's suite of products as well. Thanks for your time. I think we have got a bit of time before the break, so we might take some questions. Is that all right? Thank you. Cheers.
I love the guys walking down. I thought they were
your
bodyguards. I thought they were coming here.
No, they were coming to
they don't storm the stage when you're done. Any questions, my friends? Oh, the right-hand side here is wake up.
Please make them nice.
Yeah. Try some really, really difficult questions to Kirk. You know, I really like him.
Of course, only difficult one. So, hello, my name is Lucia. I'm here on behalf of online retailer in Romania, small country, or maybe not so small. So, regarding TV, I am still searching for that 100% digital brand, since there is no study case of a really big brand being built only with digital advertising, including Amazon has, in some countries, done TV a lot. In Romania, for example, in our case, it's about live stage, because some brands, when they're really small and you want to accelerate growth, TV can give you that. And I believe TV is more effective, or I've seen it, more effective in this type of context than digital. in the context where digital has not the same reach, and also TV gives you some element of trust. If that brand is on TV, most definitely it's huge, it's known, it's whatever. After a certain point, TV is useless. I admit. I mean, after everyone knows you, you cannot build quality of awareness with TV. So, as regards to the other questions, how to balance TV and digital and so on, this is my framework for now. This is what I've learned. I mean, you have to engage all the channels at your reach, including TV, but you have to put them into context and to understand each channel what can deliver in terms of value in the context of your brand, of the life stage of your brand, of your awareness, and so on.
Can I just say yes?
Okay. So you agree? TV is not completely useless.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And yes. So if yes will suffice, we can move. We can. But yeah, of course I agree, and that's why I'm trying. My job is to pitch for digital, and I'm sure that you go and hear pitches from all of those other traditional platforms as well. And but I'm humble to that absolute fact that TV does work. But I'll pick you up on the bit that I'll challenge back, if you like, because you said nothing allows me to build my reach like TV.
In my context, in my country.
Totally, on that. If I want to build
reality, but maybe China or whatever.
No. I think it's consistent wherever, because the conversation that we're then having is about reach. And I would say that what you're trying, when you say about building reach, you're trying to build reach of a demographic. Sure. And that is one of those tools. Totally accept that. But I think if you are trying to reach Pampers, so if Pampers are saying, actually, I need to accelerate my connection with people who are in the market for entering the nappy market now or in the near future, then I would challenge that digital allows you to build, even if your conversation is about reach, I would argue that digital has the ability to connect with that. On demographics, totally, because demographics are broad by their very nature, particularly if you look at the limitations of demographics in buying TV or radio or things like that. So
don't abuse it. I mean, mass market communication has to be used for a certain type of message, digital for another type, because if Dove wasn't so known as a brand, building all the way from the beginning, its story and so on, no one would have had the drive to watch a 3-minute ad on YouTube.
Yeah.
So this is the difference when you look as a marketeer on different channels. You have to find, and I'm not saying there's a proportion, but for sure TV has stopped being 80% of the budget, because if you go with TV 80%, you will lose. I mean, this is what the new technology adds up. Mixing the budget in a more effective way. Maybe 40% TV now.
We'll take that.
Okay.
We'll take 40% TV. Should we do a deal? Can we do a deal? Yeah. I think that represents probably lots of the comments or the thoughts of what's going on. We are not saying TV plays no role at all. What I think gives digital the opportunity is if we ask ourselves new questions. So I think if TV still stands up as the answer to some of those new questions that I encourage you to go and ask yourself, safe in the environment of your own business, then absolutely it deserves its place. That's all I'm pushing.
Another question?
Please.
Yes. Come on, guys. There we go again.
Google are likely to release cross-device tracking next month, and I'm quite excited about the potential that'll allow, mobile, desktop, tablet. Talking out as you're doing, where we're talking across a story, across platforms and across someone's life, have you got any, ideas on how we could adopt that within the retail space? So effectively, whether it be remarketing, whether it be retargeting, search, blah.
Yeah, I might sort of refer to James and Petri, who have more knowledge of your world on this one.
Well, I think just the interesting thing there is that we've known all the time that people search with different devices, but until now, more or less, kind of like the moment you look at on mobile or tablet or desktop or in the office, you were like a new person for us. And that really helps us now more or less kind of like to build the funnel. And I think what's even more exciting is the moment when we get the kind of like the last step still into physical store. And there are some experiments around that too, which I think is very, very cool. Because after that, we can really see that what's the value of the mobile click earlier in that kind of like whole consideration process into actually perhaps even buying it from a high street store. Isn't that kind of like, James, are you? Yeah. So it's just kind of like more or less kind of like connecting the dots, which is absolutely critical for all of us, kind of like to measure where do we invest.
What is quite a fun exercise on a branding level is the amount of data or signals that you're already collecting for one job that give you an opportunity today to do another job. So we did an exercise with a retailer, and we got all of the signals, the audience signals that we can collect through data, and we mapped them out, and then we challenged ourselves to think, what else could we do? So we grouped them, first of all. We grouped them in how they're currently grouped for performance buying purposes. So we kind of took them out of that context, said let's regroup them in other ways, and we came up with some crazy ideas about how we might group and segment audiences away from the performance metrics. And then we said, right, well, what can we do with that tomorrow? Because often that's the biggest push is getting those data signals embedded into your site, into your marketing that you do. But for most of the audience that's here, you already do that brilliantly. So I think that's an exercise worth doing, is thinking, how do we take that cross-device audience understanding and think, what else could we do with that we just haven't thought about yet?
Fantastic questions, by the way.
Yeah, awesome.
An amazing crowd, isn't it?
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Are you going to dance?
Did they come for you? Let's get one more question, and then I'll let you go out for a break. Over here.
Hey, Kirk.
Hello, mate.
Dollar Shave Club is a great example of a brand that built itself on the web.
Yeah.
But they did it through being authentic. How important is authenticity in branding?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We did some work with Dr. Best, the German manual toothbrush brand that some of you will know, and we used the Dollar Shave Club as an example, and because they're subscription models, etc., something that everybody. So Dollar Shave Club is a subscription model for your razors. So every month you get sent fresh razors for a direct debit fee, $1. There we go. And we use that as our model, and they absolutely loved the model of subscription. So they're going, this is saying, well, we've got to go and explore this world. But they absolutely tore it up at the thought of being Dollar Shave Club. We had to sort of stop them and say, no, we're not suggesting that you go and do that. They weren't about irreverence. They weren't about being cheeky. I mean, using the language that they use. So yeah, I mean, the clear answer is yes. Stay true to your brand story. And I think that people think, oh, well, we must do that on the web. But I would argue that there's tons of brands, and not necessarily in retail, but there are tons of brands out there that actually sacrifice their brand story for TV or to be associated with the big event. The amount of brands that I see on things like the Super Bowl, so let's take the Super Bowl, and tons of, but for every great brand story that's told in $1 billion TV spot, in the US around the Super Bowl, there's those where they've almost tried to change it too much to fit the Super Bowl audience, and that slot that actually goes away from their brand story. So without a doubt, without a doubt, yes, authenticity is key. My push would be, how authentic are you being already at the moment with your traditional media?
Let's give a huge round of applause.
Thank you.